I brought a signed and written letter to Abraham Lincoln and a letter from Abraham Lincoln responding to the letter. The letter was written to him by someone from Philadelphia from the Custom House in the 1860s, 1864. He was requesting a letter of reference. He was trying to get somebody a job.
This letter carries the unmistakable hand of Abraham Lincoln, written on July 29, 1864, from Washington during the height of the Civil War. It is a letter of recommendation, the kind of small administrative kindness a president might attend to amid enormous burdens. The note was prompted by William B. Thomas of Philadelphia, a founder of the Republican Party in that city and the first Republican appointed customs agent there, a post Lincoln himself had given him, so the two men had a real connection. Lincoln wrote his reply directly on Thomas's own stationery, which helps confirm its authenticity, as does the famously erratic handwriting and the way the nib pen scratched into the paper. Records show that on that same Friday, Lincoln also dashed off a quick note to General Grant and a letter to a woman in Scotland, a glimpse of an ordinary working day. The subject of the recommendation was a man named Van Allen, whose ultimate fate history has quietly lost.
I wish I could tell you whether Mr. Van Allen, who is the subject of this recommendation, got a job.
Yeah.
I cannot find anything of Mr. Van Allen nor his fate. It would be good to have it out of the frame and take it to a framer who will do an archival frame. They're cutting them now so that they're big so you can see all the edges of the document, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Sometimes you can do one where there's glass on both sides. There might be other information on the other side. So it might be good to take a look at it.
Yeah.
At auction, I would say that your letter, I would estimate it at $8,000 to $10,000. So definitely worth getting it conserved so that you can keep it and pass it along to your children.
Yeah, it's amazing.
This was given to me by my uncle, and it was signed by Abe Lincoln.
What do we know about the individual mentioned?
I really don't know anything about this. That's why I'm here. I've done some ancestry, and that name doesn't come up in my family tree.
This small slip of paper, written entirely in Abraham Lincoln's own hand and dated April 20th, 1864, opens a window onto his humanity. It is a military pass, and it reads that a widow named Miss E. Sharp should be allowed to travel northward through Union lines to reach her parents in Norfolk, Virginia. The date places it at the start of Grant's punishing Wilderness campaign, when the Union was driving hard toward Richmond. On that very day, Lincoln met with General Grant to discuss strategy, yet in the midst of directing a war, he paused to tend to one grieving woman's need to reach her family. Lincoln regarded the Confederate States not as a separate country, but as states in rebellion. So to him, this woman remained a fellow citizen deserving help. He wrote a number of these passes during the war, each one a quiet act of compassion that reveals more about the man than any signature alone ever could.
I thought it was just signed by him, and I'd looked up the worth of his signature some years back, and it was like a couple of $1,000s.
But an autograph on its own, what does it really tell you? If you remove it from that context, all it tells you is that Lincoln signed his name, or whoever signed the name, on that piece of paper on that day. This is in context. This tells a story, and consequently it has more gravitas and historical interest than a signature would. If I was to put an auction estimate on this today, it would be $20,000 to $30,000.
A lot more than I thought. But I'm thrilled to find out he wrote the whole thing. That's wonderful.
This is a document that's been in my family for about 150 years. My great-great-grandfather, Lewis Ellsworth, was the first IRS agent for the District of Illinois State, and it's signed by Abraham Lincoln.
This single document upends a common assumption about American history, for it proves the United States had an income tax 50 years before most people believe. Signed by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, it appoints one of the very first collectors of internal revenue for a district of Illinois. While many credit the 16th Amendment of 1913 with creating the income tax, Congress had in fact enacted the nation's first such tax in 1862 to help finance the staggering costs of the Civil War, and Lincoln appointed the first commissioner to run the new system. That wartime tax lasted only about a decade before being repealed as unpopular, then faded so completely from memory that its existence now surprises nearly everyone. Beyond Lincoln's signature, the document also bears that of Salmon P. Chase, his Treasury Secretary and later Chief Justice of the United States. Two giants of the era appear together on a humble piece of tax administration, making it a fascinating relic of a forgotten chapter.
These actually sell for a little bit less than your average Lincoln document, and I think it's because of all of this horrible connotation that we have for the IRS. A traditional Lincoln document, a military commission, let's say, might sell today for $5,000 to $7,000. These sell for more in the range of $3,500 to $4,500. Thank you very much, though, for bringing it in.
Thank you.
These are the military commission documents for our great-great-grandfather's first cousin, David Perry, who was in the Union Army in the Civil War.
What makes this bound volume so unusual is not a single signature, but a remarkable sequence of them, for it gathers the military commissions of one officer named David Perry, each signed by the sitting president of the day. It opens with his 1862 appointment as second lieutenant under the hand of Abraham Lincoln, followed by another Lincoln signature the next year. As Perry climbed the ranks across the following decades, the autographs shift with each new administration, including a genuinely hand-signed example by Andrew Johnson, notable because Johnson, troubled by a painful right hand, soon switched to a signature stamp. Later promotions carry the names of Ulysses Grant, Rutherford Hayes, Benjamin Harrison, and Grover Cleveland. To encounter any one of these commissions on its own would be unremarkable enough, but to find a complete unbroken run spanning the signatures of 7 presidents across a single man's long career is genuinely rare, a chronicle of American history told through one soldier's steady rise.
You've got 2 Lincolns. Those are about $4,000 to $6,000 apiece. You've got 1 Andrew Johnson, actually signed, not stamped. That's $1,000 to $1,500. You've got 2 Ulysses S. Grants. That's about $1,500 to $2,000. Are you doing the math?
No, keep going.
Tucker. After Grant, we had Hayes, Harrison, and Cleveland, all of whom were less collectible than the other ones. So probably another $1,000 for them.
Yeah, they've just been mostly sitting stored. But it is wonderful that they're, like you say, preserved.
This was a carving. My husband's family had it, and they all chose to pick them, and we got the last pick, but I feel like it's the best pick. My husband's great-great-uncle, his name was Abraham Lincoln Henrik. He had a boys' club, and he carved totem poles with those boys, and then he got asked to do it for the Missouri State Capitol building in Jefferson City. He made 3 totem poles for the Capitol.
Yeah.
He was asked to do one of the life of Mark Twain, and one of Truman's, because Truman was from Missouri.
Right, okay.
And then he got to bring a personal one, and this is from the personal one.
Despite the name, this charming folk art carving has nothing to do with the president and everything to do with a man who happened to share his name, Abraham Lincoln Henriks. Henriks ran a boys' club in Missouri during the 1930s and 40s, where he taught young men ages 13 to 18 a trade, good manners, and how to move through the world as gentlemen, welcoming boys of all backgrounds. He was known for carving totem poles alongside his boys, even creating several for the Missouri State Capitol, and this piece comes from his personal pole, carved around 1940. Worked most likely in cedar, it is the essence of folk art, with clasped white hands shaking against a black heart, ringed in red, surrounded by hand-lettered signs bearing his life lessons. One urges the boys to be quick to forgive anyone who says sorry. Another to apologize now and keep friends into old age. The initials carved on the back are believed to be those of his boys.
Have friends when you are old. That's good.
There were so many about just life lessons and how to live and how to love, and this would have been in the 30s and 40s.
Yep.
They were ages 13 to 18, could come to the club. And if you're going to hang out here, you're going to learn a trade, you're going to learn a skill, you're going to learn manners. He didn't let them be ugly to each other.
That's great.
And they were all ethnicities. We're very proud of the work he did.
It's a pretty nice package. You can insure a group like this easily for $3,000.
Oh, wow.
Insurance. Just for...
Okay. That's fantastic.
My stepfather's father was a collector of Lincoln things. He was a Chicago businessman, and so being from Illinois, he was very fond of Lincoln. And he had a large collection of things that, when he died in the 1960s, went to the Library of Congress. But these things did not go. The letters were in a family safe deposit box.
This group gathers 2 wartime letters from Abraham Lincoln to General Henry Halleck, written in May and October of 1862, alongside a signed photograph of the president. Composed entirely in Lincoln's hand, the letters concern the urgent business of war, the promotion and replacement of officers as Union forces suffered terrible losses in the months around the Battle of Shiloh. What strikes many readers is Lincoln's tone, almost apologetic as he presses Halleck on these appointments, careful not to overstep, a courtliness from a commander-in-chief that feels remarkable today. The photograph is a carte de visite, the small calling card-sized portrait wildly popular in the 1860s, this one taken in the famous studio of Matthew Brady. Its real distinction lies on the back, where Lincoln's personal secretary John Hay has written confirmation that the signature is authentic. To have a Lincoln photograph vouched for by the very man who worked at his side makes this an exceptional and deeply personal piece of history.
A lot of the value depends on the quality of the photograph, the boldness of the signature, how dark it is. The letters, one being on Executive Mansion stationery, again, nothing is faded, the ink is black. Each of these letters is probably in the $20,000 to $25,000 range, a conservative retail price.
Wow.
And that's conservative. Now, Lincoln photographs are fairly rare, they're hard to get. Signed ones, especially authenticated by his secretary, $35,000, maybe $50,000.
Oh my God.
For a Lincoln photograph. Again, that's a retail price. So you have a total of probably $75,000 to $100,000
Oh my God.
of Lincoln material here.
That's amazing.
I buy houses. It's a business of mine. And 10 or 11 years ago, one of the first houses we bought, this happened to be amongst a bunch of junk in a house that was kind of a hoarder's type of situation. And we found them in the basement, buried under a pile of trash.
Any sense of how a piece like this ended up in the basement of a house?
I believe that this was given to the owner of that house who had passed away. He was the president of a community council, and this had sat on top of a pedestal that was a World War II monument.
Okay.
And this has recently been replaced by a bronze bust, which is a copy of this. This used to sit on Lincoln Park Drive, which is now called Ezra Charles Drive in Cincinnati. And Lincoln
Right.
Park Drive used to lead into Lincoln Park, which now Union Terminal sits on Lincoln Park.
Okay.
So
why did you keep it?
why not? Look at it.
It's
an amazing
It's a terrific
piece.
object.
Yes.
It really is.
Discovered buried under trash in the basement of a house, this striking carved bust of Abraham Lincoln turned out to be a genuine piece of folk sculpture dating to around 1880. It was clearly made for public display, almost certainly commissioned for a civic space, and for years it stood atop a monument in Cincinnati on what was then called Lincoln Park Drive, near the city's deep historical ties to Lincoln and the anti-slavery movement. The carving belongs to a tradition that produced carousel figures and ship carvings in the 19th century, built up from laminated wood in the same way those folk objects were. It is not the most refined likeness, and that very quality gives it the honest, expressive presence collectors prize in folk art. Beneath its many later coats of paint survive traces of the original green, chosen so that when viewed from below, high atop its pedestal, the bust would read convincingly as weathered bronze. It carries enormous scale and unmistakable character.
There's no question this was made for public display. This must have been a commission for a public space. My sense is that this piece is coming out of a tradition of more of a folk kind of a piece. Think of carousel carvings or ship carvers of the 19th century. I would date this piece to about 1880 or so.
Wow.
It is not the most finely carved, and that sort of gives it a little bit more of the folky feeling, but it's a very good rendering. Like the carousel figures, it's made out of laminated wood. It has great presence and great scale. This has had many different coats of paint on it,
Right.
but there are traces of the original green on here. And if it's displayed up high in the air, looking at it from below, you're going to say, look at that great bronze. As a piece of folk sculpture, this has a lot of presence. The flip side of that is, what do you do with it? It makes it harder to place in a collector's home. But a folk art collector with a big enough place, this makes a huge statement. I would say at auction, maybe $5,000 to $7,000.
Okay.
I brought a ceremonial sword that was given to my great-great-grandfather in about 1856, and he later became the consul to Bavaria, and I brought his certificate naming him as the consul.
Wow. Who was the sword presented by?
It was presented by his men in the Philadelphia Artillery Brigade in the Pennsylvania Militia, and it was presented at the time also by the governor of Pennsylvania and Simon Cameron, who eventually became Lincoln's first Secretary of War.
Correct. Do you know what that regiment was called?
His regiment ultimately became the 27th Pennsylvania.
This pairing unites a magnificent presentation sword with a document signed by Abraham Lincoln himself. The sword was given around 1856 to General Max Einstein by the men of the Philadelphia militia unit he had founded, known as the Philadelphia Flying Artillery, a heartfelt token of their esteem for their commander. Made by the celebrated Ames Manufacturing Company of Massachusetts, it represents the absolute pinnacle of their craft, with an original silver grip worked in floral and geometric patterns and eagles adorning the crossguard and pommel. The accompanying document elevates the whole group, for in 1861, early in his presidency, Lincoln appointed Einstein as United States consul to the Kingdom of Bavaria, and the appointment carries a full bold ink signature in the president's own hand, with no fading at all. Together, the sword and the commission trace the life of an immigrant who rose to lead men and represent his adopted nation abroad, honored both by his soldiers and by his president.
All in his hand, deep colors, no fading. It's a beautiful signature. And if you notice, it's dated in 1861. That's early in Lincoln's presidency. Also a wonderful thing to have with it. It's not a sword you'd ever decide to sell.
Right.
So I'd insure it for $15,000.
It's been hanging on a wall for years and years, so.
And the appointment with the good, clear signatures is something you would need to insure for around $5,000.
Okay, that's good to know.
Fantastic piece.
Was Abraham Lincoln's campaign flag from 1864, I believe. Abraham Lincoln didn't fit, so they put Abram.
Lincoln was running against McClellan, who was a Civil War general.
This printed cotton flag was made to rally voters for Abraham Lincoln's re-election campaign in 1864, one of the most consequential elections in American history. Held in the middle of the Civil War, that contest pitted Lincoln against his former general George McClellan, a man he had once commanded armies through and with whom he shared a deep mutual dislike. Many doubted Lincoln could win while the war still raged, and a defeat might have meant a negotiated peace, leaving the nation divided. Campaign flags like this served as bold visual propaganda, carried in torchlight parades and hung at rallies to put the candidate's name before the public. A charming quirk gives this one away as a period piece, for the name Abraham would not fit the space, so the printer shortened it to Abram. Surviving examples of these fragile cotton banners are scarce, since they were never meant to last beyond the campaign season, making this a vivid relic of a pivotal moment for the country.
Campaign flag from 1864, I believe. Abraham Lincoln didn't fit, so they put Abram.
Lincoln was running against McClellan, who was a Civil War general, and they disliked each other intensely. But this flag, the value would be $8,000 to $12,000 at auction.
This lies not in its gold, but in the remarkable web of history surrounding it. According to long-held family tradition, it was a gift from Mary Lincoln, the First Lady, presented to mark the birth of a daughter to her friends the Sickles family, and the locket is engraved with the initials of that child. The recipient's father was General Daniel Sickles, one of the more colorful figures of the Civil War era, a celebrated and controversial Union general who lost a leg at the Battle of Gettysburg. Before the war, he had become infamous for shooting his wife's lover, the son of Francis Scott Key, then winning acquittal in a sensational trial. That the Lincolns counted such a figure among their friends, and that Mary marked a private family milestone with this gift, makes the piece a genuine and well-documented Lincoln relic. Unlike so many vague Lincoln keepsakes, here the connections fit together cleanly, lending the small necklace the first reading of the Emancipation Proclamation before Lincoln's cabinet. It is the work of the artist Francis Carpenter, who considered the proclamation one of the great achievements of humankind and was determined to document it. Carpenter petitioned the president directly and was invited to live in the White House for 6 months, using the state dining room as his studio, where each cabinet member sat for him in turn so he could build the scene with care. Down to the chandelier and a portrait on the wall behind, the print stands as both a work of art and a deliberate act.
Well, my husband's great-grandfather was the governor of Ohio between 1846 and 1848. His son was his secretary, who was only 21 years old at the time, and he collected a number of autographs, specifically started with the signers of the Treaty of Ghent in 1814. And he had quite a collection of those. I don't think the family ever threw anything away.
2 extraordinary documents anchor this group, both tied to Abraham Lincoln at the beginning and the very end of his national story. The first is a fragile pamphlet printing his Cooper Union address, the speech delivered in New York in February of 1860, just before the presidential campaign took shape, widely credited with propelling the relatively unknown Lincoln into the national consciousness and toward the White House. This was how the public first read those words, and at the top, in ink, Lincoln personally inscribed it with his respects to the original owner's ancestor, a presentation copy from the man himself. The second document is a black-bordered invitation to Lincoln's funeral services in Springfield in April of 1865, accompanied by its original mailing envelope. These mourning invitations are quite rare, as few were ever distributed. Together, the pair spans Lincoln's rise and his death, the speech that launched him and the solemn notice that marked the nation's farewell, an arc of history held in 2 pieces of paper.
I'm really quite bowled over by this one. I looked in auction records. I was not able to track down another copy with an inscription like that. And I think if I was doing an insurance appraisal for you, on this one item alone, I'd put a value of $60,000.
Wow.
It's a very important piece.
Oh,
it's in wonderful condition. You've kept it in immaculate condition. And the inscription is clear, bold. You couldn't ask for more.
I'm really flabbergasted because I've always thought that the invitation was the real special one.
But without that inscription and signature, this would only be a couple $100.
It's a quilt that my mother and father-in-law designed and quilted. They wanted to make an entry in the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. The theme was the Century of Progress.
In each one of the squares, they wanted to show an old and a new.
This ambitious quilt was designed and stitched as an entry for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, whose theme was a century of progress, celebrating 100 years of American advancement. Its maker built the whole composition around that idea, with each square pairing something old against something new to illustrate a century of change. At the center sits an elegant 1930s woman, surrounded by 4 notable men chosen to represent the era's achievement: Thomas Edison, Franklin Roosevelt, Charles Lindbergh, and Abraham Lincoln. Ringing the outer border are the names of inventors, scientists, and industrialists who shaped that 100 years of discovery. The result is a genuinely sophisticated and thoughtful piece of design, a folk artwork that doubles as a heartfelt tribute to progress and ingenuity. Though it never won, and in fact missed the contest deadline, the quilt endures as a wonderful expression of one maker's vision and craftsmanship, a personal monument to optimism stitched at the depths of the Great Depression.
Names of inventors, scientists, people who moved and shaped industry and scientific discovery in that 100 years. This is just wonderfully thought out and very sophisticated and thoughtful design. I know it didn't win, and I know it didn't even make the contest deadline, but for replacement value, I would place $12,000. place medallia on this.
Great. That's great.
This is a letter that is written to Andrew McCormick, who was my great-great-grandfather. It is written to Abraham Lincoln in 1841.
I don't think I've ever seen an Abraham Lincoln letter of such feeling. It is absolutely one of the most emotional Lincoln letters you'll ever see. You always think of Lincoln as being so calm and steady and sedate. Even the handwriting in this letter.
Most people picture Abraham Lincoln as calm, steady, and measured, which makes this letter so startling, for it may be the most emotional he ever wrote. Penned in January of 1841, long before the presidency, it captures a young Lincoln genuinely agitated, his handwriting itself growing hurried and almost angry across the page. He was writing to a close friend, so close that he signed it simply Lincoln, about a local election that mattered deeply to him. A man named William Walters was up for re-election, and Lincoln could not support him, because his own dear friend Simeon Francis was running against Walters. Learning that his friend might actually vote for the wrong man, Lincoln expressed utter astonishment that someone so true and unwavering could even consider such a thing. The letter survives in pristine condition, its ink and emotion equally vivid. It offers a rare and human glimpse of the future president as a passionate young partisan, fighting hard for the people he loved.
Let me just read a few of the lines here. I have just learned with utter astonishment that you have some notion of voting for Walters. This certainly cannot be true. It cannot be that one so true, firm, and unwavering as you have ever been can for a moment think of such a thing. A Lincoln letter of an early date from January 1841. It's not dated, but we're able to find out when Walters was going to be reelected and the context of the letter. The condition of the letter is absolutely pristine. Something like this would be in the ballpark of $75,000 to $125,000 at auction. What do you think of that?
I had no idea.
And you're keeping
And this
it...
belongs to my 18-year-old son right now. So.
Well, your 18-year-old son has something very wonderful to keep in the safe deposit box. It's an absolutely wonderful piece of Americana.
It's a letter from my grandfather. It was written in 1865. He wrote to his uncle, and he was in Washington, D.C. at the time. He and some friends went to the theater one evening because they had heard that Grant was going to be there, so they thought they wanted to make sure they could see him.
This letter is a first-hand account of one of the darkest nights in American history, written on April 21st, 1865, by a young man who had been inside Ford's Theater exactly 1 week earlier. He and some friends had gone hoping to glimpse General Grant, who was expected to attend, and so they found themselves present on the evening of April 14th, the night President Lincoln was shot. Writing to his uncle in a gifted and vivid hand, the young man set down what he witnessed with remarkable detail, even correcting an account he had read in Harper's Weekly about where the president sat and how the assassin moved. He describes the assassin leaping to the stage below, injuring his leg, then rising and crying out, before crossing the boards and disappearing. The letter carries the raw immediacy of an eyewitness who understood he had seen history turn. Composed only days after the event, it remains a sober and deeply affecting record of a national tragedy.
He said, "I have done it." By that time, he had crossed the stage and partly turning, he waved his dagger on high and shouted, "The South avenged." This description just, that's my hair stand up. Like, it's just unbelievable. Where do you keep it?
At the bank.
In a safety deposit box,
yes,
right?
And I'm really concerned because I think it needs some sort of preservation for sure.
It does. The letter written by your grandfather, he wasn't like a recognized person, right? So a letter written by him would be just have a very dear family value. But the contents of this letter just makes it so incredibly important. A conservative estimate at auction would be $10,000 to $15,000. I would expect it to go much higher than that. But at auction, you want to play things safe, and you also want to get people to bid. And so 10 to 15 would be an awesome starting point.